Hello, everyone. Greetings and welcome to Journalism 205, Multimedia Journalism. Dr. Shermack here, and as you can tell by these floating logos coming at you, we are going to talk today about social media. All right, social media. And of course, that's a very, very broad subject. Why are we talking about it today? Well, I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of an overview of my take on social media in relation to journalism. One of the questions I get asked most often when people find out that I'm involved in journalism, have worked in journalism, taught journalism, is, oh, social media is bad for journalism. How has that changed? How has that made a difference? So on and so forth. There's a lot of talk about that there. So we're going to get into that a little bit briefly today, just as sort of a primer for what will be ongoing discussions, not only in this module, but in other areas of the class as we move forward. So what's on the big show for today? I'm going to give you a quick module overview for what you're doing in the class this week. And then the core of today's discussion is social media. I'm calling social media and journalism, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because there are all of those things involved. When we wrap up with that, we'll do a quick look ahead at what you're going to be working on in relation to this video, and that should help you kind of pair things together with this discussion. So, again, thanks for joining. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in on the discussion. We have the AMA. You can always email me. I highly encourage you to reach out. Don't forget about my office hours as well. And we can always set up a Zoom too. So there's plenty of ways to reach me. Don't forget that. All right. So, what we're going to talk about today um, is thinking a little bit about social media as a means of reaching your audience. And there's an actual metric related to this called reach. It makes sense, right? And we want to do sort of what's happening on your screen right now, and that is build up those like counts, build up that meaning. But it doesn't necessarily mean that good journalism builds like counts. I think it does, right? But that's not a measure. You can't say, oh, well, that piece got 700 likes and that piece got 200 likes. So the 700 liker is a better piece of journalism. That isn't always the case. It's really important for you also to define your social media presence. So, if you have a social media presence already, that's great. You may want to build on that as a journalist. If you have a social media presence that isn't all that journalistic, and we'll talk about that, maybe you want to start a new one, right? The bottom line is, and what I really want to emphasize, because I get a lot of pushback on this, is that you need some kind of social media presence here. This is not a place where you can come in and hide on social media, at least successfully. I know there's journalists that do it, and the ones that do it are super proud of it. I'm not on any social media. That's fine. All right. I don't think that's the best practice. I don't think that's the way to go, especially if you're trying to build your career. You need as much exposure, not only of your work to the public, but you yourself need exposure with the public, right? Learning to interact, so on and so forth. Journalism is a public act, and social media helps us do that. Um, and also using social media as a tool in journalism to better our reporting, to reach out to people, as we've discussed. Those are all vital to what is happening here with social media. So let's get into it in more detail. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Um, I started as my first social media was Facebook, and I was on Facebook. This is going to make me sound kind of like a social media dinosaur, but I was on Facebook before it was opened up to everyone. The only reason I got a Facebook account was because I was in grad school in 2000. Let's see, I think I started on it in 2004, and I had a .edu email. And some of you may not know that back in the day, the only people who could get Facebook accounts at the time were .edu email users, and that didn't change until late 2006, early 2007 when it opened up to everyone being able to use Facebook. So for a while, it was only open to students. That was kind of the original vision of Mark Zuckerberg. Now, if you want to know more about that, I would actually encourage you to watch the movie The Social Network. It's a great movie, and it's a pretty accurate depiction of how he started Facebook and a lot of other things that have happened. So let's talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think a big question to answer, and it's the question I get a lot, how has social media affected journalists and journalism? Maybe you want to think a little bit about this right now as you're preparing to watch this. How has social media affected journalists and journalism? I'll be really honest with you, it's entirely reshaped the industry. It has entirely reshaped the way that journalists do their jobs, and something that I studied quite a bit while I was in my PhD program, something called journalistic routines. And it's made a huge difference in how any journalist proceeds, whether that's interacting with the public or doing news gathering, so on and so forth. It's made a massive difference. So hopefully you're thinking about some ways that maybe you've seen it change or your experience has changed involving journalism and social media. Let's talk about the good. Let's start with the good and how it's benefited. Uh, Obviously, when you are a journalist, the number one thing you want, besides doing good, honest reporting and being ethical, you want people to read your stuff. You want people to view your stuff. So I would say at a very basic level, social media is a conduit through which we send our journalism to the people. One of the things that newspapers particularly learned really hard at the turn of the millennium and in the internet boom is that if you don't chase your user, if you don't put the news where your user is looking, they're going to leave you behind. And early on in the internet days, newspapers thought, we're fine. We don't need to engage with the internet. People will come to us still because we're newspapers and we've been newspapers forever and we're the old reliable. And guess what? People stopped coming and newspapers started closing and going away. And that is never a good thing for this industry. And I don't think it's a good thing for democracy anywhere. So when we were given new tools to spread our journalism, to create work that we can send to the people, that's excellent. And social media does that. Social media has also given us something called participatory journalism. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of uh, maybe being retweeted by a journalist or sending out a post and being contacted by a journalist. I have, and I'll actually address that in one of our discussion boards this semester. I'll share that experience with you. But that was a moment of participatory journalism. The definition of this is journalism that is done um, in part by someone from the community, someone from the audience. So maybe you are walking down the street and there's a car accident, right? You snap a picture of that car accident, post it to your X account, for example. A journalist finds it and they say, "Oh, this is a great photo from this breaking news. Hey, so and so, can I use your photo in the story?" And then you agree or disagree or whatever. Um, they should ask. Sometimes they don't, but they should. And boom, you've done participatory journalism. Maybe it's asking, having someone reach out to you on social media. You said that you were at this big festival and they want to know what the scene is like, who's there. They reach out to you. Can you give me some quotes? Can you give me some information? That's participatory journalism. So it's given journalists a brand new set of eyes and ears and a whole new stack of words to use in their reporting. And that, of course, is good news too. It's got to be verified. There's always a little risk there. But this is definitely the good here. I think it's also helped us network, right? If any of you are on LinkedIn, you probably, and that's a social media. I know people don't think that. Some people think it's a dating site. That is not a dating site, FYI. Uh, but it's a networking site. And as journalists, we really need our networks. If you are covering a beat, let's say you're covering the police beat, and if you've built up your network, you know the police chief, you know the public information officer. Maybe if you're in a smaller town, you also know the fire chief and the fire public information officer. There's a major event, an accident, a fire, some kind of incident, you can turn to those people in your network immediately, right? So we can network better because we create digital bonds with people through social media. So that's a huge advantage there as well. And that gets to the next point too, which is just giving us more tools for news gathering. If you're not using social media as part of your process when you're putting together a story or a video or something, you're missing out on a lot of content. It's not only reaching out to find sources and maybe photos, other things, it's also just getting a sort of a sampling of how people are feeling about something, or getting a sense of which way the wind's blowing on an issue. That's a really good way to use it. And then if you see information out there, of course, it is best practice to verify that. So if you see someone reporting something, you can reach out to them directly through social media and say, hey, can I call you? Can I follow up with you to see if this is real? You can use different words than that, but that's essentially what you're doing, right? This then leads, notice how things are leading one to another. This leads to audience interaction. Social media has made journalists more interactive with their audiences than ever before. Back in the day, let's say you wanted to give a newspaper reporter a piece of your mind, right? That guy wrote something and I don't like it. I'm going to write him a letter. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to either handwrite, or if I was really fancy, I was going to type a letter, and then I was going to take it to the mailbox and put a stamp on it and drop it in the mailbox and wait for it to get to the newspaper. And then maybe that newspaper reporter would have seen it, maybe not. Now it can happen in an instant, right? And there's actual dialogue taking place. So it's not just someone angry from the community talking at a reporter. It's now interaction, which is super important. And I think it's really good to dialogue with journalists, holds them accountable, but also creates relationships between journalists and their community. And I know a lot of good story tips that come through on social media, good reporting, so on and so forth. So those are all excellent places. We talked a little bit about this content promotion, right? So maybe you send out a post on X because you have a story coming out tomorrow that people will be excited to see. You take your own, let's say you work for the Questonian, our student newspaper. The Questonian publishes a story. By all means, you should be pumping that story out on your own socials to promote it, right? Get it out there, show people what you're doing, build up those clicks. Why not, right? And part of that is the next item, and we'll talk about this much more later on this semester, but personal brand building, right? Who you are. People are going to go look for you on social media. If you're not there, again, your privacy, your world. But in this class, I'm asking you to be on social media because, quite honestly, in journalism, if you go work for a professional organization doing journalism, they're going to make you be on journalism, but make you be on journalism, make you be on social media. All right. So get used to that. Um, it might be kind of cool to be like, oh, I'm not in social media and I'm kind of, off the grid or whatever. You can't be off the grid in journalism. You are the grid. The grid is your space. Okay. That's like being a bus driver, but saying you don't want to drive the bus. Can't do it. Can't be a bus driver then. So building that personal brand is important because people will look for you and it will help you become a better journalist. Okay. And you might say to me, wait a minute, Shermack, you're going to get to the bad stuff like right now. So when I see this bad stuff, why would you think I'd want to be on social media? Well, I would harken back to what we just talked about. There are more, I'll say it right now. I'm kind of spoiling maybe the rest of the spoiler alert here, but I think there is more good collectively to social media for journalists. For journalists, let me be really clear with that, right? There is more good for journalists to social media than there is bad and there is ugly. Okay, but we need to be prepared and understand the bad and the ugly so we can get the most out of the good. And that's what's important. So the bad part of it, all right? Additional job demands. Okay. So what happened was when the newspaper, I'm using newspaper a lot. That's where most of my experience is in, but it was similar in other areas, whether it was broadcast or, broadcast TV or radio, so on and so forth. But newspaper is where I've done most of my study, and I think it's the best example of this. A lot of newspaper reporters were saying back in like 2010, 2011, 2012, hey, I'm being asked to do this Twitter thing back when it was Twitter, this Facebook thing. Now I got to have a LinkedIn page, but I'm still trying to write my story on a deadline. I'm still trying to pump out a story every day, going to talk to sources, so on and so forth. And a lot of them are saying we just can't keep up. And one of the reasons why is because they didn't know the new technology. This was especially true of more veteran reporters, right? No, probably a little older. There were a lot of studies that went out there. I did a study back that was published in 2015 about sports reporters and sports reporters using Twitter, what was then Twitter, during games when they were covering a baseball game. I looked at baseball because it's my favorite. And I found that so many of them didn't know in the prior research to what I was doing, so many of them didn't believe it was worth it. They didn't think it was worth it, and they also said they don't have time for it. So my kind of purpose in writing it was to help them learn, hey, what are the best types of posts I can make that get the most engagement because I don't have time to do it. So I'm not just going to throw random things at the wall and see what sticks. What can I do best? And of course, and not surprisingly, it was a little bit of a enigma back in 2015, but we found that the most engaging posts usually contain some kind of video, some kind of analysis, which is a weird thing for a objective journalist to do a little bit. It is sports, so there's a little bit of a difference there. But they were learning to make better types of tweets from me in order to get more engagement because they had such little time. All right. So that was important. So, you know, there's an expectation from the audience that you will be there and you will be on social media, and you have to meet that expectation if you want to keep your audience because they will go elsewhere to find people who are on those on the social media. And I think we've seen that play out in the last several years since I published that study. It takes a tremendous amount of maintenance. You're maintaining a public image in a whole new space, right? And one of the reasons journalists have been a little bit apprehensive about using social media is that sometimes it's rough dealing with an audience, right? People get angry. People give you feedback you don't want to hear. My dissertation was about broadcast meteorologists, TV weather people, right? The people that forecast your weather each and every day and go on television and talk about it. And one thing I took away from that dissertation, it was a year and a half of work, was just how poorly meteorologists are treated, particularly among women, and their feedback that they did not want, right? Particularly with women having to do with their dress and their appearance, so on and so forth. I've heard some pretty horrible things, and some people just want to avoid that altogether. But even those who reported that to me told me, yes, that sucks, but I still feel like it's vital for me to be on social media. And I agree with that. Um, Another thing that social media did was it added more competition, right? And I think in a good way, I'm kind of tempted on bad here because I think there's some good in adding more competition. The online journalism environment has grown dramatically. It's giving what we typically call legacy or quote unquote mainstream sources a run for their money. I think it's better to have more of those in the space, more people chasing the truth. That's a good thing. But added competition means that there's going to be some bad things out there. There's no more gatekeeper. You can start your own news outlet today. Fire up a YouTube channel, fire up a X account, fire up a Facebook page, fire up an Instagram. There's no more gatekeeper. So some of the folks out there in the online space are quite frankly bad actors. We'll get into that a little bit more on the ugly, but it's still competition. I think competition fuels innovation. I think it fuels excellence. But some people view it as, oh, there's just more people out here to compete with. So that can kind of be good, bad, depending on your perception, but it's something to think about. Let's now switch to the ugly. All right. And I'm going to pick up off the last piece I said because, of course, with the flood of information that is out there in the internet age, okay, um, of course, some of it is bound to be what is bad information. I don't care much for the phrase fake news because I think fake news does a disservice to actual fake news that is out there because that really exists. If people don't like something or they disagree with it, they call it fake news. That's not very good for news literacy. I'm concerned about actual fake news and what I like to call misinformation or disinformation. Misinformation is information that is mistaken and then fired out to the universe And then other people are reading it and saying, "Oh, that's true," when it's actually wrong. It's a mistake, a misinterpretation, something a little more innocent than disinformation, but still very harmful. Disinformation is the worst. It's the ugliest of the ugly because that is information that is distributed with the intent to mislead, the intent to divide. And social media has brought that smack in our faces 100,000 times over, right? What's different about the internet technology that is different about preceding technologies is the speed and the reach, right? So many people, and this is all moving lightning fast. Okay. So, you know, what happened is there was so much bad information being spread on social media, whether it was misinformation or disinformation, people started to look at any information and say, well, that all must be bad. And good journalists, of which there are many, 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 started being called fake news, and people started doubting them and questioning their reputation just because they were sending out information. It's important to know that not all news is fake news. In fact, most of it isn't fake news. Okay. People are putting their reputations on the line. People are practicing the craft. There's still good ones out there. There's bad ones. There's dishonest ones. There's bad actors in this space. I totally acknowledge it. But we can't, as they say, throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And then another thing that I studied a little bit in my meteorologist dissertation was the really ugly audience interactions. It's one thing for someone to say something kind of off color to you or to challenge your coverage or whatever, but it's another thing when it turns into what's known as incivility, right? Attacks, name calling, and even threats. I think I wrote threads on the slide. Threats, all right? Um, that goes beyond any norm, and that is not normal ever and should not be accepted as normal. Threatening a journalist, attacking a journalist for the way they look, who they are, what they wrote, what they reported is not okay, and I don't want that to be the norm. And it feels like it's slipping a little bit that way, and we need to stop that. It needs to be called out, it needs to be reported, right? Because the social media space is very different than other media spaces of the past, where for the most part, it's pretty much guarded and policed by the users. That's when you flag a post or report a post. Everyone needs to do their part to get this stuff out, to get the ugly stuff out, so we can hang on to the less ugly, and certainly so we can hang on to the good. So, what can we do? What can we do now as budding journalists? What can we do as creators in this space, content producers in this space? What can we do? It's not as complex as you think. Take control. I say be your own advocate. And that comes into creating a brand that you're proud of, creating a perception of yourself that is authentic, A, and B, promoting of your work, showing that you're an ethical journalist, showing that you're a strong storyteller, that people can trust you with their story. You want to project that. I think you also have to set controls as far as limits go, too. Too much immersion in the social media space isn't a good thing. And I like the social media space. I'm happy that I'm living and teaching and producing in this era of social media journalism. One way you can get the most out of social media is to use it for the good reasons we discussed. Use it to find sources, use it to find information, use it to make content. Take a look at TikTok. TikTok has a really powerful editing tool built right into the platform. You can do really good journalism just using that app. And yes, you heard me right. I said TikTok. It's out there. So there's more positives than negatives. I truly believe that. I get pushback on that a lot, and I'm prepared for that. And I see the bad things that have happened in social media spaces, but there's a reason why it is intertwined in not only this class, but other classes that I teach as well. It's vital. It is vital to journalism. So, again, just kind of a quickie overview of this area. This week, we're going to focus on social media, and we're going to read two chapters from the Adornato uh, book. One is called Your Social Media Brand, Who Do You Want to Be? So, this speaks a little bit about what I just mentioned about building a strong, ethical brand on social media. And the other one is called Social News Gathering, and that is using social media as a tool in your journalistic processes. We'll have a discussion of the same name as this lecture to hear some of your thoughts on social media, which I'm excited to read. And then don't forget about our quiz. And then we'll also start the Follow a Journalist assignment that will look at the ways journalists use social media. The best way to learn is to go see how it's actually being done by the pros at reputable outlets. All right. I'd like you to kind of stay away from influencers a little bit here and look at reputable news outlets, the journalists who are working there. It's going to be a different brand of things. If you want to use an influencer, email me. Give me a heads up. All right, that's the show. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. As always, reach out if you have questions, swing by my office, and I will see you next time here in 205. Everyone have a wonderful day. Take care.